It was the first Christmas in years that truly felt hopeful to me. I'd been alone for so long since my husband passed, but this year, Daniel, my son, had called. He said, "Mom, bring your famous apple pie. The kids can't wait to see you." His voice carried warmth I hadn't heard in months, so all week I baked and wrapped small presents, knitted scarves, handmade cookies, and little wooden toys my husband once carved patterns for. I imagined my grandchildren's laughter, the smell of pine, the house glowing with family again. But the moment I arrived, the air changed. Tasha, my daughter-in-law, opened the door. Her smile was practiced, tight. Behind her, the sound of chatter and clinking glasses filled the house, but none of it felt welcoming. "Oh, you're early," she said, glancing over my shoulder as if expecting someone more important. I held up the pie, my hands trembling slightly from the cold. "Thought I'd come a little before dinner," I said softly, "so I could help out." She stepped aside, not saying much, and I entered the house that used to feel like home. The scent of cinnamon and pine candles filled the air, but something else lingered. Distance. Daniel came down the stairs, smiling faintly. "Mom," he said, hugging me quickly, almost awkwardly. His eyes didn't meet mine long. I brushed it off. Maybe he was just busy. It was Christmas Eve, after all. The children ran to me, bless their hearts, wrapping their tiny arms around my legs. "Grandma!" they cheered. My heart warmed instantly. I handed them the small gifts I'd made, and their excitement filled the room with a joy I desperately wanted to hold on to. But from the corner of my eye, I saw Tasha watching. Her jaw tightened when the kids thanked me. "You didn't have to bring all that," she said, her tone almost scolding. "Oh, it's nothing," I smiled. "I just wanted—" "Really, Margaret," she interrupted, turning to her family seated in the living room. "Mom goes overboard every year. She never knows when to stop." A few quiet chuckles followed. I felt my face heat up. Overboard? I looked down at my old coat, at the pie cooling on the counter. Maybe I did look out of place among their designer outfits and glittering decorations. Trying to ignore the sting, I busied myself arranging the gifts under the tree. Every ornament seemed new, expensive, uniform. None of the handmade ones Daniel and I had crafted years ago were there anymore. Dinner preparations were underway. Tasha's mother and sister moved around the kitchen, whispering, throwing me polite but distant smiles. I offered to help, but Tasha waved me off. "Everything's under control," she said curtly. So I sat quietly in the corner, clutching my tea, watching laughter ripple across the room. Everyone seemed to belong. Everyone but me. When Daniel finally looked over, I smiled faintly. But before he could speak, Tasha leaned close to him, whispering something I couldn't hear. His face darkened. He turned his gaze away. A cold ache spread through me, the kind that has nothing to do with winter. I looked around the home filled with twinkling lights and realized something painful. I might have been invited, but I wasn't wanted, and deep down, I felt it. The warmth of Christmas was slipping away, replaced by a quiet chill I couldn't yet understand. The dining room sparkled that evening. Crystal glasses, polished silver, candles flickering like stars. The smell of roasted turkey filled the house, mingling with laughter and clinking plates. It should have been perfect. But something about it didn't feel like family. I hovered near the doorway, waiting for someone to say, "Come, Mom, sit here." But the table was already full. Tasha's parents, her sister and brother, even a cousin I'd never met. Each seat taken, each plate perfectly set. Daniel glanced around the table and hesitated. Where should Mom sit?" he asked. Tasha's smile was tight, rehearsed. "Oh, there's a stool by the counter," she said casually. "It's just for tonight. The table's a bit small." The room went silent for half a breath. I felt every eye turn toward me. I smiled, pretending not to mind. "That's all right, dear," I said softly. "I'll be just fine there." So while they sat under the warm glow of the chandelier, I perched on the hard stool by the cold kitchen counter, my back to the room. Every now and then, I caught glimpses of laughter and conversation, stories from Tasha's family, jokes I didn't understand. Daniel spoke once or twice, but mostly he listened. The children, bless them, tried to bring me their mashed potatoes, but Tasha quickly stopped them. "Eat at the table, sweetheart. Grandma's fine where she is. I wasn't fine." But I kept smiling. When the wine started flowing, the tone changed. Louder, lighter, a little careless. Tasha's mother raised her glass. "To family and new beginnings," she toasted. And then, glancing at me, she added with a laugh, "Some traditions just fade with time, don't they?" They all laughed softly. I lowered my eyes. My husband used to carve the turkey every Christmas Eve. We'd save a plate for everyone, even neighbors who had nowhere to go. He believed no one should be left out during the holidays. Now I was the one left out. Tasha came over briefly, her perfume strong and sharp. "Margaret, dear, do you mind taking the pie out of the oven? It's starting to burn." I nodded and rose quickly, grateful for something to do. But when I opened the oven, the pie was perfect, golden, not burned. I realized then, she just wanted me out of the way. She leaned close, voice low so no one else could hear. "You really don't have to try so hard every year. They're my kids now. My traditions." My throat tightened. "Tasha, I never meant to take anything from you," she smiled without warmth. "Of course you didn't." Then she walked away before I could say another word. I stood there, holding the oven mitts, my hands trembling. The laughter behind me grew louder, brighter, as if mocking the silence around me. Later that night, after everyone had finished dessert, I began gathering the plates. "Let me help," I offered. Tasha turned sharply. "You've done enough already," she said. Her voice was cold, sharp enough to cut. The room went quiet. Even Daniel looked stunned. But before he could speak, Tasha forced a smile and added sweetly, "Maybe it's best if you step outside for a bit. Get some fresh air." Her words hung in the air, soft but heavy, like snow right before it falls. I nodded slowly, setting the plate down. "Of course," I whispered. As I reached for my coat, I looked around the glowing room one last time. The family I'd loved, the home I'd helped build, now filled with people who looked right through me. I stepped toward the door, feeling the chill creep in from outside. Behind me, laughter resumed. The fire crackled. Christmas songs played softly, and with every step toward that door, I felt the warmth of my family, and of Christmas, slipping further away. The night air hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, and unwelcoming. Snowflakes drifted down lazily from the dark sky, catching in my hair as I stepped onto the porch. I pulled my coat tighter, convincing myself it was just a misunderstanding. She probably didn't mean it that way, I thought. Maybe she just needs space. I could still hear the laughter inside, muffled through the walls, warm and full of life. The kind of laughter that used to fill my home when Daniel was little. Back then, Christmas was our season. My husband would play the old records, Daniel would hang ornaments unevenly on the tree, and I'd bake enough cookies to last till New Year's. I used to be the heart of Christmas. Now I was standing outside it. Through the window, I could see them gathered by the fire. Tasha's family sat close together, wine glasses in hand. The firelight flickered against their faces, soft and golden. Tasha leaned against Daniel's shoulder, smiling, whispering something that made him chuckle. And then I saw her point toward the door, toward me. They all laughed. My stomach turned. Maybe it wasn't about me, but the timing, the way Daniel avoided looking my way. Something inside me knew. I took a deep breath and reached for the doorknob. It didn't turn. I tried again, harder. Still nothing, locked. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had accidentally flipped the latch. I knocked gently, once, twice. The sound was swallowed by the music inside. No one came. I tried again, louder this time. "Daniel?" My voice cracked. "Sweetheart, it's cold out here." The laughter inside only grew. I pressed my forehead against the glass, peering through the thin gap in the curtain. The firelight blurred through my tears. I saw Tasha take a bite of pie, my pie, and laugh as she fed Daniel a forkful. He didn't even glance at the window. The cold began to seep into my bones. My hands were shaking now, partly from the wind, partly from something deeper, disbelief. I'd raised that boy, stayed awake through fevers, worked double shifts after his father died, gave him everything I had, and tonight, he couldn't even open the door. I sank down onto the porch bench, snow crunching under my boots. The wood felt like ice through my coat. I wrapped my scarf tighter and whispered to myself, "Don't cry, Margaret. Don't you dare cry." But the tears came anyway. They slid down my cheeks, freezing before they reached my chin. Every sound from inside, every burst of laughter, every clink of a glass, felt like a hammer striking my heart. Minutes turned into an hour. My fingers went numb. I looked up at the stars, whispering a prayer my husband used to say when times were hard. "Lord, give me strength when I am small." I almost didn't hear the sound of tires crunching over snow. A car pulled into the driveway across the street, headlights cutting through the darkness. The door opened, and I saw Mrs. Harris, my neighbor. A kind woman, maybe 10 years younger than me, carrying a grocery bag. She froze when she saw me sitting there. "Margaret? Oh my goodness, what are you doing out here?" I tried to stand, but my legs trembled. "Just getting some air," I murmured weakly. She frowned, glancing at the glowing windows behind me. "It's below freezing." Did they lock you out?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came. The truth was written all over my face. Mrs. Harris dropped her bag and rushed over, wrapping her coat around my shoulders. "You're freezing." "Come with me right now." I looked once more at the window, at my son, my grandchildren, the warmth I thought was mine. Then I turned away. The snow crunched beneath my feet as Mrs. Harris guided me toward her car, her arm firm around mine. Behind us, the house glowed brighter than ever. But to me, it had never looked colder, and as the car door shut, I realized I hadn't just been locked out of a house, I'd been locked out of my own family. Mrs. Harris's home was small but warm, the kind of place that smelled of cinnamon and old books. As soon as we stepped inside, she guided me toward the couch, wrapping a thick blanket around my shoulders. "Good heavens, you're shaking," she said, hurrying to pour me a cup of hot cocoa. I tried to speak, but my lips were stiff from the cold. My hands trembled as I held the mug. The warmth stung at first, a reminder of how numb I'd become. She sat across from me, eyes full of worry. "Margaret, what happened? Did they really—" I took a deep breath. They asked me to step outside for a while. And then the door, it just locked." Her brows furrowed. "And they didn't notice you were gone?" I forced a weak smile. "They were busy, having dinner. I didn't want to ruin their evening." Mrs. Harris shook her head slowly, disbelief in her eyes. "Ruin their evening? Margaret, you could have frozen out there." The words hit harder than I expected. I looked down into my cocoa, watching the steam swirl away. I don't think they would have noticed. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then I spoke again, quietly, almost to myself. "You know, when my husband passed, Daniel was all I had. I worked 2 jobs just to keep him in college. He promised he'd never forget what I did for him. But ever since he married Tasha," my voice faltered, "it's like she built a wall between us. And I just kept knocking, hoping he'd hear me." Mrs. Harris's face softened. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "And he let her, didn't he?" I nodded, a tear slipping free. Every time I visited, she found a way to remind me I didn't belong. At first, I thought it was just me being sensitive. But tonight, I can't pretend anymore. Mrs. Harris sighed deeply, her voice firm now. "You've been silent too long, dear. There's kindness in you, but people like that, they mistake it for weakness." I looked at her, startled by the steel in her tone. She leaned closer. "You deserve respect, Margaret. You're his mother. That woman has no right to treat you like this." I smiled sadly. "Respect isn't something you can demand, Mary. It's something they give, if they still see you as family." She was quiet for a moment, studying me. Then she said, Maybe it's time your son sees who's really freezing you out." Her words hung in the air, heavy and true. Later that night, she insisted I stay in her guest room. I tried to refuse, but she wouldn't hear of it. "You're not spending Christmas Eve alone, not under my watch," she said, fluffing the pillows like a mother hen. When I finally lay down, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the day sank in. My body was warm, but my heart, it still felt cold. I thought about Daniel's face, how quickly he'd turned away when Tasha whispered to him. And for the first time, anger started to stir beneath the sadness. A quiet, trembling anger that whispered, "Enough." As I drifted into sleep, a thought settled deep inside me, a seed of strength I hadn't felt in years. Maybe Mrs. Harris was right. Maybe silence wasn't kindness anymore. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the low murmur of voices. Mrs. Harris was in the kitchen, and she wasn't alone. A young man sat across from her, papers spread out on the table. When he turned to me, his voice was calm, steady. "Mrs. Walker," he said. "I'm Thomas, Mary's nephew." "She told me what happened last night." He paused, a small, knowing smile on his face. "And I think I can help you." When Thomas introduced himself, I assumed he was just being kind. Another young man with polite manners, trying to comfort an old woman on Christmas morning. But as he spread the papers on Mrs. Harris's kitchen table, my heart started to race. "These," he said, tapping the documents, "are copies of your late husband's estate records. Aunt Mary mentioned something about your son inheriting everything, and how you were living with him now?" I nodded cautiously. "Yes. After Robert passed, everything went to Daniel. Robert said he wanted to make things easy. I never questioned it." Thomas exchanged a glance with his aunt, then looked back at me. "I don't mean to pry, but did you ever see the full will yourself?" I hesitated. "No. Daniel told me what it said, that everything was in his name because he'd handle the finances." I trusted him. Thomas sighed and leaned back. "That's what I was afraid of." He opened a folder and pulled out a document, old but official, stamped and notarized. "Mrs. Walker, your husband's original will was never changed. It states clearly that you were the primary beneficiary. Half of the house, all the savings, and the family land in your name." My eyes widened. "That can't be right." Daniel said. "That the will was updated?" Thomas interjected gently. "It wasn't. This is a certified copy from the county office. I checked last night after Aunt Mary called me." The room blurred for a moment. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and betrayal, so, "All this time," I whispered, "he made me believe I had nothing, that I had to live under his roof out of charity." Mrs. Harris's voice trembled with restrained anger. "That boy and his wife stole your dignity, Margaret." I pressed a hand to my chest. My heart pounded, but underneath the ache was something else. Clarity. The fog of years of guilt and self-blame began to lift. Thomas continued, his tone careful. "If you want, I can help you reclaim your rights. It'll take some paperwork and possibly legal action, but," I interrupted softly, "I don't want revenge, Thomas. I just want the truth to be known." He nodded. "Then we'll make sure it is." That afternoon, while snow continued to fall softly outside, we sat together making copies, reviewing every page. Each line I read felt like a piece of my strength returning. By evening, Thomas handed me a small folder. "Everything you need is in here. Documents, proof, even contact info for your husband's lawyer. If you decide to confront them, you won't be alone." Mrs. Harris smiled proudly. "See? The Lord works in mysterious ways. Sometimes truth knocks on the door just when you've been locked out." I laughed, a short, shaky laugh that turned into tears. She hugged me tight, and for a moment I let myself cry freely. When I finally pulled away, my decision was clear. "I'm going back," I said. Mrs. Harris frowned slightly. "Are you sure? It's Christmas Day, dear. You shouldn't have to face them today." "I've waited long enough," I said quietly. "They need to see the woman they tried to erase." That evening, I stood outside my son's house again, the same doorstep where I had shivered the night before. The laughter inside had faded, The party was over. Only the faint glow of the fireplace flickered through the curtains. For a moment, doubt crept in. My hand trembled as I raised it to the door. But then I remembered Thomas's words, "You won't be alone." I knocked. The door opened slowly. Tasha stood there, still in her velvet dress, surprise flickering in her eyes. "Oh. You came back," she said, her tone tight. "We weren't expecting—" "I know," I interrupted softly, holding up the folder. "But I think it's time we talked about something you've both kept from me." Before she could respond, Daniel appeared behind her, confusion etched on his face. "Mom, what's going on?" I met his eyes for the first time in years, really looked at him. "The truth, Daniel. It's time we opened that door, once and for all." The silence that followed was heavy, the calm before the storm. The living room was still warm from the fire, but the moment I stepped inside, the air turned heavy. Tasha froze in the doorway, her painted smile cracking. Daniel looked between us, confusion clouding his face like fog before a storm. "Mom," he started cautiously, "why are you here?" "You should have called—" "I was locked out, Daniel," I said quietly, my voice trembling but steady. "Your wife made sure of that," his brows furrowed. "That's ridiculous." I opened the folder in my hands and laid the papers gently on the coffee table, the same table where my grandchildren had opened presents hours ago. "Is it?" I said softly. "You might want to read these before you decide what's ridiculous." Tasha's face paled. "What are those?" "The will," I replied. "Your father's will. The real one." Silence filled the room, interrupted only by the crackle of firewood. I watched Daniel's hands shake as he reached for the papers. His eyes darted over the text, then stopped. He read again, slower this time. Finally, he looked up at me, stunned. "This says, the house is in your name." I nodded. "Yes, it always was." Tasha tried to snatch the papers away, her voice rising. "That's impossible." "He told us everything was transferred years ago." "Your father never changed his will," I said firmly. "You've been living in my house treating me like a guest. Or worse, a burden. And yesterday, you locked me out of it." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no sharp words ready. Daniel's face turned red, shame creeping up his neck. "Mom, I swear I didn't know," Tasha said. I stopped him gently. "You believed her, Daniel. You believed everything she told you, even when it meant turning your back on me." Tasha's voice trembled, the arrogance finally slipping. We thought you didn't want to live here. You always looked uncomfortable." I looked her straight in the eyes. I was uncomfortable, because this house no longer felt like a home. Every word, every look, every little reminder that I didn't belong. That wasn't my imagination, Tasha. That was your cruelty. She flinched, and for a moment, I saw something flicker. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. The fire popped loudly, as if punctuating the silence that followed. My eyes went to the mantel where Robert's photo still stood, his kind smile frozen in time. I took a deep breath. Your father built this house for our family. He wanted it to stay filled with love, with laughter. He didn't build it so his wife could sit on the porch in the cold while strangers filled the rooms. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I can't believe this, he whispered. What have I done? You let someone else decide what kind of son you'd be, I said softly. But it's not too late to decide what kind of man you'll become. He looked up, tears welling in his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. For the first time in years, I saw my son, not the man hardened by pride or marriage or distance, but the boy I raised, the one who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard. Tasha's voice cracked as she tried to regain her composure. So what now? Are you going to throw us out? I held her gaze. I'm not heartless. The children shouldn't suffer for the sins of their parents. Daniel and the kids can stay for now. But you, Tasha. Her lips trembled. Me? You'll need to leave, I said simply, until you learn what respect looks like. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. You can't do that. Daniel looked at her, the realization settling in. Actually, She can. The words hung in the air like justice finally spoken aloud. I turned toward the fire, the warmth brushing my face. This house has seen enough cold hearts, I said quietly. It's time it remembers what warmth feels like. Tasha stood frozen, speechless for once in her life. Daniel rose slowly, his shoulders slumped but his eyes softer than they'd been in years. Mom, he whispered, can we start over? I turned to him, tears burning my eyes. Yes, Daniel. But this time, let's start with honesty. As I spoke, a log in the fireplace shifted, sending sparks dancing upward, small, golden embers rising toward the ceiling like hope finally unburied. The fire burned lower that evening, the last golden light of Christmas flickering against the walls that had once echoed with silence. I sat quietly, in my old armchair, the one Robert used to tease me for never replacing. And for the first time in years, the warmth felt real. Daniel sat across from me, his head bowed, the children asleep upstairs. The faint murmur of carols played on the radio, their melody soft and distant. Outside, snow drifted past the window like a curtain falling after a long, painful play. He finally spoke, his voice cracking. Mom, I don't even know where to start. Start with the truth, I said gently. That's always the hardest, but the most important place to begin. He nodded slowly. I should have protected you. When Tasha treated you badly, I told myself it was just tension, just differences. But I saw it, Mom. I saw how she made you feel small, and I let it happen. I looked at my son, the man who had built walls around his own guilt, finally letting them crumble. You were trying to keep your peace, Daniel, I said softly. But sometimes keeping the peace means letting good people get hurt. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. She's gone. Packed her things and went to her parents' house this afternoon. She didn't even say goodbye to the kids. I sighed, not with anger, but with the heavy sadness that follows truth. Sometimes absence teaches what presence couldn't. The fire popped, sending sparks fluttering upward like fireflies. I leaned back and let my mind drift to the Christmases Robert and I used to host, to the laughter, to the smell of pine and sugar cookies, to the sound of Daniel's little feet running through the hallways. Somewhere along the way, life had turned those sounds into echoes. But tonight they were coming back, one by one. Daniel broke the silence. The kids asked if Grandma's still mad at Daddy. I smiled faintly. Tell them Grandma doesn't get mad. She just hopes people learn. He looked down, voice small. Do you think I can fix this? Fix? Us? I reached across the space between us and placed my hand over his. Families break, Daniel. They bend, they bruise. But if there's love, real love, then nothing is too far gone to heal. He wiped his eyes and nodded, whispering, Thank you, Mom. Later that night, after he went upstairs, I stayed by the fire. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence was peaceful, not empty. I thought about Tasha, her sharp words, her cold eyes. I wondered if someday, when pride softened and time humbled her, she might knock on this door. Not as the woman who locked me out, but as someone seeking to be let back in. And if that day ever came, I knew I would open the door, because forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was warmth. The clock struck midnight. The radio faded into a soft instrumental tune. Snow fell heavier now, blanketing the world outside in quiet purity. I whispered into the firelight, Robert, I did it. I finally stood up. For myself. For us. A tear slipped down my cheek, but it wasn't from sorrow. It was release. The house that had once felt like a stranger's now breathed again, alive, glowing, safe. As the embers dimmed, I reached for the knitted blanket on the couch, wrapped it around my shoulders, and let the warmth sink in. Christmas, I murmured, isn't about the gifts or the feast. It's about the warmth we give and take away from those who love us most. Outside, dawn began to tint the snow with the first blush of gold. Inside, by the fading firelight, I closed my eyes. Finally at peace, finally home.